This is a webinar organized or announced by the International Coaching Week. And I'm an Appreciative Inquiry practitioner for more than 25 years. And I don't know how many of you know about Appreciative Inquiry, but it's a methodology that focuses on the strengths, on what works, on the best that there is, on the aspirations and dreams of people. And normally it is used for big groups. And in this case, what I did is to apply Appreciative Inquiry in one-to-one coaching. So this method that I call Flourishing Together, it's written and published in this book that it's here in the screen next to where you see me, Flourishing Together Guide to Appreciative Inquiry Coaching. And it's published by O Books. It's in English. You can also find it in Spanish. And the idea is how to apply the methodology, the being and doing and believing from Appreciative Inquiry. That is the principles of Appreciative Inquiry. And welcome, Cecile. You are in the big circle, and if you don't mind to click in another smaller circle, because I would like, yes, thank you. Cees is gonna come any minute. He's gonna focus more on being and becoming a thinking partner. So we start with the Appreciative Inquiry coaching. And in Appreciative Inquiry, the first step is to define what we're going to talk about. So normally, for example, when you do coaching, you define the objectives. What is it that we want to talk about? And normally it's the client that brings those objectives. And normally they have a problem, a situation, a doubt, a question that has brought them to you as a coach. And what we do in Appreciative Inquiry coaching is we define an affirmative theme. So you can see next to me these arrows, and at the center is the affirmative theme or the affirmative topic. And what we want to focus on is not what the client wants less of, but what does he or she wants more of. So that's what we call it affirmative, because normally they say, oh, I don't want to have so many problems, I don't know, with my partner, or I want to reduce the conflict of my team. And so they focus on what they want less of. And an Appreciative Inquiry, we shift it into what do you want more of? So this would be one of the key differences on how do we create the setting in an Appreciative Inquiry coaching. What are we going to focus on? What are the themes we're going to talk about? This problem, that problem, and that problem. This is what the client brings. And so we start by asking questions. Okay, if that problem was not there, what would be happening? If you would have solved that situation, how would it look like? And by these questions, we see what the client wants more of. And then we define the topic or the topics that we are going to talk about in our coaching session. So this would be one of the key differences of some other kinds of coachings and Appreciative Inquiry coaching. What do you want to see growing in your life, or in your team, or in your work, or in your profession? And then we go to discover what are your strengths, what are your best practices when you have solved whatever you want to solve. In the past, maybe you overcome a situation. What were your strengths? So we look into the best practices and the best that there is in that person and in their system, and the their values, their strengths that will help achieve or live the affirmative topic. So let's put an example. The client comes with a conflict with his or her team. She or he is a leader, and it's the person is having a conflict with their team, and so we ask, okay, how would it be if that conflict would not be there? And maybe the answer is, well, we would communicate better, we would focus more on what we need to do instead of being stuck in the past of what happened. And then by those answers, we start inquiring, okay, so you want to be more focused on what needs to be happening. You want to have a flow in communication. So then the affirmative topic could be something, of course, I'm saying it very, very shortly here, but I want to go through the whole thing and then go to becoming thinking partners. So I'm being very brief in each one of the steps. So then the affirmative topic could be on creating a communication that flows amongst each other, for example. And so we're going to discover what helps when the communication has been flowing in that team, what has helped. And so we go into the strengths and best practices of that team, what already worked. And what we find is that the person becomes more enthusiastic because they focus on, we want flow in communication. We want a communication that flows in our team instead of focusing so much on the conflict that creates hopelessness, creates blaming and sometimes anger and upset. So we are focusing on what we see, we want to see, what the client wants to see growing. And we discover that actually in the system there are already strengths to make that grow. So that creates confidence and trust that yes, it is possible. And then we go into dreaming. Okay, so imagine that 2 years have passed and your team is in a state of complete flow of communication. And then you do a visualization in which you take the person to live that dream. And this you can only do it when the person has gone through choosing an affirmative topic and discovering the best strengths and practices that they have in the system, so that they come out of a belief that it's impossible, we've been trying for a long time, we're not going to achieve it, because from that state of mind it's not possible to dream. And the space of dreaming in appreciative inquiry is different than the desired future. Let's say that I'm going to move a little bit, that I am here, and from here you as a coach ask me, okay, what is your desired future? So from here I think, what would I like, but from here, so it's the desired future. What we do with the appreciative inquiry dreaming phase is, through a visualization, we take the person to the dream, And then from here, I am living my dream in the visualization. And then what is happening? How is it happening? So, as if it was in the present. And this creates a connection with the deep dreams and wishes of the person. And from there, you can ask, okay, what's happening? How is it happening? What do you see different? And then ask a question, what has happened to reach there? What helped you reach there? Welcome, Cees. So what helped you reach there? So you are answering as if your dream was alive, and it's you answer from a deep wisdom. It's like we connect with a deep wisdom, and then what emerges, it's very powerful, really. You need to experience this. It's very, very powerful. Powerful because it creates a transformation quite fast, because the person sees it. And one of the things that David Cooper Ryder, who's the founder of Appreciative Inquiry, the creator, one of the things he says is, you cannot live your future unless you see it. You cannot create your future unless you see it. The compelling image of the future is what will give you the strength to come out from where you are and fly and go to where you want to be. And then from that space, we see, okay, what are the key elements that we need to focus on to achieve that dream? And from those key elements, we go into the phase of design, which you see in the arrow is like the fourth area of or the fourth step of Appreciative Inquiry, in which you design provocative affirmations, proposals, principles that will help you move towards that dream. And then we go into commitment and practices and what will keep alive that flame or that wish of wanting to be there. So let me just share this very briefly through an example. So this person was a woman, was pregnant from Mexico. She lived in Barcelona for a couple of years, and she was in love with a Catalan man, a man from Catalonia, from Barcelona. And she used to give workshops and lectures in Mexico, and they were always full of people. And in Barcelona, no one knew her, no one was coming to her workshops. So she was in big doubt. Should I go back to Mexico? And my partner is willing to leave his job and come with me to Mexico? Or sure, I stay here and I feel very sort of desperate because anything I do, no one is coming to my workshops or lectures, or maybe one or two people. So inquiring, that's why it's called appreciative inquiring, we saw that the affirmative topic was finding my home. She was not feeling at home in Barcelona. So the topic was finding my home. And then through the process, when we went into discovery, we saw the key elements of what it meant for her to find in her home. And in her dream, in the visualization, which you need to know how to do that visualization so that it's open enough so that the person really dreams, but it has to be appreciative. And actually, in the book, I share about that methodology, but of course, the book is not enough. So I've created a training which is in Spanish and also in English online on Appreciative Inquiry Coaching. And So what we did with her in that visualization, she saw herself in a house, and the visualization was like 3 or 4 years from now. She saw herself with a couple of children, and she saw herself writing and painting. She didn't see herself giving workshops or lectures. It's like her maternity, her becoming a mother, had shifted her wish, and she was at home painting and at home writing, but with her children. So you see, this was a dream which shifted her um, her deep anxiety that I'm giving workshops and no one is coming to them, to actually maybe my career is shifting and I'm going to share my wisdom and my experience through other artistic ways instead of through the mouth talking, so maybe writing or painting. And then we saw, okay, what are the steps that you need to focus on to create that shift from where you are on to where you want to be. And of course, that question of I don't know if to go back to Mexico or not shifted. The question changed because she saw herself differently. So anyway, this is an example. I can share many other examples, but then I want to go into the thinking partner. I don't know if Case is here or not yet in your camera. Okay, Case, welcome. Welcome. I just shared briefly about the 5 steps of appreciative inquiry. So, what we see is that when we go into coaching leaders, appreciative inquiry coaching is very transformative, but we also need to amplify our way of accompanying in a way that we can understand what's happening inside the brains and the soul or the person of the leader. And so I would like you to shift your attention to the diagram that is next to Case, in which it's like a diagram of our and anyway, I think I'm gonna close your microphones because there's someone that let me see. Okay, so the thing is, what does it take to be a thinking partner? It's like from coaching you go to another level, let's say, I don't know if the level is the right word, in which you become a thinking partner of the leader. And as a thinking partner, you have a repertoire of inquiry. So one of the powerful inquiries is the appreciative inquiry, which are questions of what gives life, what moves, what is transformative, what gives life to your team, to yourself. How do you give life? How do you give energy to your system? How does the system enrich you, etc.? But there are many other kinds of inquiries: humble inquiry and diagnostic inquiry and relational inquiry. We have about 8 kinds of inquiries. And so in our training on becoming a thinking partner, we go into the depths of those inquiries. And then as a thinking partner, I also need a deep level of listening so that I can listen through the words of what the person is saying and to awaken the appreciation, because I don't know what happens in many of our cultures. We tend to criticize, to judge, instead of really appreciating what is. And so the leader also focuses on what is not working, what is the problem, and so instead of appreciating, they complain. So how do we shift that from complaining, from, we call it, from the language of deficit to a language of abundance. And also focus on the relation, because we are relational beings. So this is all in this scheme, in this drawing that you have at the right of the screen is in blue. And so the role of the thinking partner is to help the other to change, adjust, or improve his or her thinking in such a way that he or she is able to handle a certain problem. And so I'm gonna pass the microphone to Kay, so I enable the microphones. If you see that any of you is making a bit of noise, because this is a very sensitive, you can, how do you say that? You can mute yourself, yeah. And then we will have a time for questions. So Kees Hoogendijk is joining us from The Hague, and he's Dutch, and welcome.
Thank you, Miriam. So remember that there is a question in the chat box, so that we should leave some room for maybe even more questions. So, and I can imagine that we move on after your introduction of this very complicated scheme. I think it's good that we leave it in this small size and not make it bigger, just to hover around a little bit more. So, welcome to you. I should have asked if you are hearing me. So, if I see you, just point your finger up, and then I see something happening, and then we are already a little bit in dialogue, which is a good behavior.
Yes,
So,
let me interrupt you just for a moment, because at the beginning I shared that those of you that are in circles sort of below, you can click into an empty circle. You can click with your mouse into an empty circle, and then you move up.
and then you
And
come even closer to me. Yeah,
yeah.
that is absolutely possible in Go Brunch. Um, so yes, if you go through this single question of what does it take to be a thinking partner, just to introduce myself very shortly, I'm into organization development, which involves leadership development, of course, with an idea, my dream of a learning organization, or even what I studied for 10 years and wrote about, a generative organization, an organization that has the capability of not only responding to situations, but sort of, although it sounds a bit weird, to create its own future, a future forming organization. So if we speak of, leadership as at least in the first part of Miriam's story about appreciative inquiry, it is already quite something to manage yourself or to lead yourself as a person. So imagine that you take up the responsibility, if possible, to lead an organization which consists of all, now several or hundreds or thousands of individuals. So can you even think of managing or leading this? So this is the complexity where we are in. So we should be a bit more honest, because when we took up this topic, Miriam and I, to bring this to the world, what does it take to be a thinking partner? Then we focus on being a thinking partner of leaders of organizations in the context of the not knowing, in to be convinced that you can't know everything of an organization, especially not as the external person that is presenting him or herself as a thinking partner, but even not so for the leader of that organization. It's somehow sort of impossible to know everything that's going on. So what can we do? What do we need to do? And this is where we think that the green part of this image comes in. The idea is, and this, if you just ask questions or because this is a bit of a complicated thing I'm going to try to point out. So imagine that we have a conversation. We are the thinking partner, and in this course, the student is the thinking partner under construction. We are the thinking partner, and the other, let's call him or her, the client, the leader. So our aim is to help to be an accompanying person for that leader to make possible that the organization involved, let's say, can flourish to the max. And that somehow the leader can influence that process, can support, can make it possible. Not just by managing or takes more. Then it needs some kind of understanding. If this course, which has multiple elements, but one of the main elements is that it's not only focusing on the process of the thinking partner relationship, which is mainly that blue part of the image, which is about being equal, which is, maybe the consultant Edgar Schein, as was mentioned, with process consulting, the helping relationship to be equal with the person. But that, in my opinion, is not enough. The idea is that we, as an organizational leadership thinking partner, create, develop, or already have some knowledge about the specific elements causing an organization to develop, to learn, to become a flourishing organization. And it may be that the leader of that organization is not so much aware yet. So one thing in this relationship is to find out first, how does this client see his or her organization? And the way to find out is to bring in new context of how to look at an organization to find out whether my view, whether my view is different from the view of my client and how we both can develop this. The first thing we have to take in mind is that we both, me and my client, look at the world through some lenses. We could call them value systems, and that is one of the elements in the right upper corner of this image. Value systems. It's a kind of framework we look at the world, and maybe the first thing to do in the relationship is just to find out, how are you looking, dear client, at your organization? Through what kind of lenses? If you're more like a power-oriented or supporting-oriented. So how are our lenses? So the first step is to adjust our lenses, that we understand that we may look the same, which can create a blind spot for us, or we may look very different, which can create that we don't understand each other yet. Then, but building on this, we can really go into views on how to look at organization and its possible ways of development. Again, and we're taking here 4 main pathways to look at it. There may be more, but this is our selection. We think it's already quite something. One thing is interesting to take into account. We as a client are not only processing a process level, we bring in some knowledge about organizational development, not like to spread it out and to tell them or to advise, but we bring in the knowledge to find out whether this knowledge is present or not, or sufficient in the view of the client, and whether it's relevant or not. So this course will bring you new knowledge about organization development besides the capabilities of this process consulting. And just to go a little bit through those parts of knowledge, we come again into the value systems theory, which is known as spiral dynamics, but has a foundation in the work of Professor Claire Graves, The Levels of Human Existence, and which a certain Marcel van Marwijk, a Dutchman, transferred this into organizational value systems so that we can look at organization and see if organizations as a whole may be more result driven or more network oriented, more learning or more rigid, and understand because of that what kind of interventions would be necessary to bring that organization to a next level. There is no thing as just let's have a change objective and let's bring that organization there. We need to understand the organization as an organism, as a very complex organism to do so. So this is already actually a second step in our relationship. We first attuned our personal value systems, and now we're going to tune the way we look at the value systems of the organization and the behavior of it and how to move on. That is one. And let's sink it in because we'll go ready to another body of knowledge, which is about the work of Dave Snowden, the so-called Kinevin model. And I think you should type it in, or I type it in because it's a sort of a Celtic word. I will type it in. Kinevin. Here it is. You'll find it on the internet, which gives a different view on organization from the idea of situations to be handled. It's always about change and development, whether they are simple or complicated or complex or even chaotic. And one of the simple, and that might be one of the simple rules, this maker of this model, which is also a framework to look at organization, is saying that often leaders and managers have a tendency to assume that a certain situation is one level before the actual state. So like a situation is complicated, but it's handled as if it were simple. Now, if we go just in the nowadays situation, think of a city council organization, a governmental organization with so many differences in approach, so many services. You can only understand that this must be a complex situation, such an organization. Any attempt to develop or to change something can't be seen as simple, which is following a simple recipe, or even complicated, following a certain strategy. It's complex because also the world around that organization is complex. Knowing that, the leader should learn to approach this complexity, and if you want to change something, also with the strategy for changing complex situation, which is not the strategy you learned at the business school where you learn to be a master in business administration. But there's no school yet that is called Master in Business Emergence or something like that. So this makes the glasses, the focus, the framework of the Kinevin model very worthwhile. And it's still for lots of managers a new view. Wow, I never looked at this way. And actually, it's quite a fast switch. Oh, wait, it's not simple. I thought it was simple. I should approach this as complicated. I should approach this as. So with this building block, we can now look at a more, I would call it maybe even a more aesthetic view at organization, not in terms of the organization chart or the job titles or the task or the results, but what actually is presenting itself to me. What kind of image do I see when I look at organization? And this is a famous book of a certain Morgan. The book is called Images of Organization. And we really go into this because organizations have, especially for the ones that are employees that are working in it, they can manifest them in different ways. And the way we may know each other as the most common way is that it's a sort of like a machine. You know, all the employees are parts of the machine, and you can just take a part out and you put a new part in, and the machine stays running. It works very well with a car or a motorcycle, but actually taking out one person and replacing by another person, and then you think that everything stays the same? No, of course not. And this is even the basic image of an organization, where there are at least seven other images like, wow, it can also be a psychic prison for some people. They feel dominated by a very strong power structure or hierarchy. Or hopefully it is experienced as like a river, a flow, an organism. It can grow, in which I can feel free. So, eight kinds of typical images of organizations to work with to understand even the organization better. All this, of course, not to forget, is to help develop the organization a little bit further into more maturity. And when we talk about maturity, there's Robert Keegan, of course, and the levels of maturity, which again, you can mirror it to yourself as a leader. Where am I in my level of maturity? Can I see myself? Can I understand myself? Can I even be, appreciative with myself and learn from there? All these kind of levels can also be, can or maybe need to be used when you try to make a change in your organization because of all the situations it will be. So if you take this, and now in a nutshell, of course, this both is knowledge for what we think a thinking partner should take, and of course, it's not knowledge that you just learn from a book, but the knowledge develops itself in the corresponding, in the communication with the client. So the whole thing of this course is, of course, that you find yourself a client, hopefully a friendly client, a willing client, and that you build up this knowledge together. So we will feed you, you use it, and that is the way. You don't need to read the whole book of 800 pages of Morgan, but you can use the images and find out which works. And
Yeah,
this is,
so in a case, it's like you are accompanying a leader, and the leader has an issue. So we saw how from appreciative inquiry we go from defining the issue from a language of deficit to a language of abundance. But that is not enough when you go into really accompanying the client, the leader, as a thinking partner. Through which value system does he or she see the situation? Is it a complicated situation or a complex situation and he or she sees it as simple? What is the image that he or she has of the organization, and what is the level of maturity of his thinking? So, as a coach that becomes thinking partner, it's important to, let's say, to read between the lines, and to listen and to ask the right questions that will help you and the client to see what is happening really in the person in relationship with the organization, and in the organization in relationship with the person. So I did put the link in the chat. To get into the chat, you will see a few dots, and then you have the two links to get to know a bit more about becoming and being a thinking partner, and about the Appreciative Inquiry Coaching. So you can either put your microphone on and ask a question to Cees or to me, let's have a dialogue,
Yeah.
or you
Just a
write
word,
it.
just a word of appreciation.
Yes.
I sometimes think that ChatGPT is very good in giving summaries, but I think you did even better to make a beautiful summary of what I was trying to explain. My congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm now in the process of writing my 15th book, and I have to practice. It's like when you start sharing ideas, and then it's like a wild field of flowers, and then you have to condense it into the essence. So, yeah, so Shimpi was asking in what typical coaching scenarios appreciative inquiry works best. Well, I haven't found typical coaching scenarios, so I don't know what you mean really by typical coaching scenarios. Of course, it depends on the country, on the background. As you heard now from Cees, the leader has many different scenarios. So, I mean, in general, I can answer that appreciative inquiry works in all situations except when the person pretends he or she wants to change, but they really don't want to change. But I would say, even then, you get to a point that the person has a mirror in front of themselves, and then you realize, okay, so you want to be as it is. You keep complaining, blaming, and actually you don't want to change. So then you reach that moment in which, it's like a moment of truth. Do you want to move forward or not?
Maybe to add to this, because I could also say where where not appreciative inquiry in general is effective or not. Because the interesting thing is the moment you engage in an appreciative inquiry conversation, you could say every of that kind of conversation is a sort of coaching conversation because it always has the effect of strengthening the other. Of
Mm.
course, there are situations like people in an acute crisis that there's perhaps something else to do because appreciative inquiry needs a certain quietness of the mind to come back to. And if
Yeah.
somebody is screaming, you can't ask, oh, what is the best, go back to a nice situation. Somebody is screaming. What I also can say is that we sometimes meet appreciative inquiry fellow practitioners from all over the world in
Yeah.
conferences, and they come from, from Asia, from the East, from the West, from Europe. There are differences in style and background, as you can imagine. From the Americans may have more the organizational, the success, and the best practice. The Asian people have a tendency to maybe to more the spiritual side. The Europeans pragmatic, but I never found a person of any place of the world that appreciative inquiry was strange to. So I think it fits. It fits to any culture.
Hmm.
It's a human thing.
Yes. Yes. Any other comment, any question? What do you appreciate from what you have heard? You can put your microphones on or write in the chat, whatever you prefer.
I have a question.
Yes, Rose.
I'm from Canada. I'm just wondering if you are in a culture that does not promote, I don't want to say growth, but people are playing safe.
Hmm.
And how can you, at least in your own circle, kind of encourage that appreciative inquiry within the group, and then maybe from that you inspire other group to change, because it's hard to change a whole culture.
A culture is a big thing. Um, and as I already pointed out, even in an organization which is much smaller than a whole country or a whole group of people, a culture is a big thing. It's even difficult to we take it as a word, and then we assume that the word is already true, and then we even try to discuss changing the culture. So what if to appreciate, because it starts with us, would be I take you as you are. I take the situation as it is. So, because although I support all the ideas, and I know that there may be organizations or societies where people are more on the safe side or protecting themselves because it may not be safe, but still, to appreciate means I take you as you are. So I'm not going to label you as being you are on the safe, even not an individual, because I think it's already difficult to. I work sometimes with teams about diversity and inclusion. You know, we can't designate a whole team to a certain behavior. Some are quiet and some are. So, what if it would just be a team? You don't want to promote appreciative inquiry. You just want that team to make it the next step, to be successful, to be have a nice job, to open up and say what is there. It could be done by what I would say the two single words of appreciate, by to appreciate. I appreciate you as you are. Rose, also you. You are who you are. And then we inquire, so what could you go from there, and just forget about whether you call this safe, because what is safe for me is unsafe for you. We just don't know.
Yeah, I would like to add to that because, for my experience, I would say that some people they need safety and security, and some people they are moved by freedom, so they are more adventurers. They risk more, and I found out in different cultures. I lived in Latin America. I lived in India for a long time. I live in Spain now, where I was born. But um, of course, we are generalizing, and culture is a big thing. But for some people, to be alone is safe, and for other cultures, to be alone is unsafe. In some cultures, to be together is better than to be alone, for example. So I would start in my inquiry by asking, okay, what is safety for you? And where is the real safety for you? Because sometimes, and I think life has shown this to us, and through the pandemic, the COVID also, you think some pillars are very strong and are safe, and then boom, they collapse, and there's no safety there. So I think it's interesting to, well, thank you for this question. It's interesting to inquire from where do you find your real safety. And sometimes you mention play safe, like I am afraid to what others will think. I am afraid of what may happen. So I play safe. This is how I understand playing safe, but maybe here we are already in different galaxies. Maybe you
Yeah.
understand it differently. Yes,
And
Case.
then to add to in an appreciative inquiry practice. So I think you were maybe referring, Rose, to a certain team, a group of people where safety. But if you sense, like if a team coach, or that safety if is an issue, that could be very well, and then you bring it up on the agenda somehow, not on the conventional agenda. We should talk about safety, but the appreciative inquiry way, in a nutshell, would be like, can we create the space for having an inquiry about psychological safety, for example. And let's do it in this way, because appreciative inquiry practitioners, we direct the process, not the content. We direct the process. I say, what if a first step, if you think it's okay, what is the first step is you would just go in pairs of colleagues that trust each other. You find a colleague that you feel comfortable with, and you just exchange questions like Miriam said. When did you feel safe? Just exchange. Because the interesting thing is, if there are 10 people, so first of all, they in 5 pairs, they will exchange about when they felt safe. We have at least 10 stories over the floor. And then you ask them, can you share this in little groups or something? Then we have suddenly 10 different interpretations of safe on the table. And then, now, you don't have to do anything anymore. The conversation starts, wow, do you call that safe? You know, and then you just smile and lean back because you entered a conversation about safety, which is so much better than trying to get the definition of it.
Yeah, no, and I take this to another question, which is sometimes the client tells me, no, because I have to be safe, for example, I have to be safe. And then I ask, who says that you have to be safe? Which voice in you or in your system is saying that you have to be safe? So, in a way, you question the assumption of your client. And sometimes the client may say, oh, you may think that I am crazy. And they already tell you what you think about what they're going to say. And I learned so much by putting questions of appreciative inquiry, starting by questioning myself also and my assumptions. Anyway, thank you, Rose. I don't know if we responded to your question or any other question. We need to close the session. We said maximum it will be 1 hour.
Some people have to be on time for the next. I see in the chat box.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. And I have been recording this session, so I will see how it came up, and I will send you the link. I may hang it in some platform and send you so that you can revise it if you want. And thank you, everyone. So, when you go into a workshop, you come through one door and maybe you come out through another door. But here you also have to come out from the door. So if you see above case, there is a little door. Then you please come out through that door. Okay? And that is better. It's healthier. Not just to jump out of the window, but come out of the door. Okay.
Make your day valuable.
Yeah. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening. And we hope to see you soon. You have now our both mails, so you can write to us if you have any question or you want to continue the conversation. Thank you. Good.